The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country for another week, as Paul Henry has said, rebuilding paradise. It'll take a while economically, yes, but compared to anywhere else in the world, we still live in paradise. The autumnal colours with the mild weather that we've had this weekend, wherever you were out and about amongst the mountains, hills, rivers and beaches, we have to be the most fortunate population on earth, in my mind. Where were you this weekend? Where were you for your your newly legislated freedom? Instagram this weekend, I tell you what, it got so much more Insta-worthy. Instead of all of the Instagrams were coming through from my mates, waking up high in the mountains to sunrises, riding the hills, catching a wave, and more importantly, feeding those duck ponds. Of course, it's this weekend, it's opening weekend. I want to get to know you, of course, a little bit more, as we do here on Sarah's Country, in the comments below. Tonight, I want to know, what was your favourite activity that you got up to this weekend around the country? As we live stream Sarah's Country over the next hour, I'm going to be able to see your comments below, and I'd love to share what great things that you were doing around the country. I had a great weekend exploring the Kapiti Coast, something I never have done before and never sort of thought to go to. Beautiful part of New Zealand. Learned to fly fish during the day and went to see kiwi at night, but the highlight, of course, was eating out and not having to do the dishes. Restaurants, of course, are now open under level 2. Where did you go? Did you get out and about and go to your local restaurant? And what do you recommend? I'd love to hear in the comments below. I want to give a 5 stars out to the front room in Waikanae Beach. Amazing place. Let's share recommendations. What a great way to support local here in New Zealand. If you're new to the show, g'day. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm your host, Sarah Perium, and this show is all about our audience, being at the table of our food and fibre production here in New Zealand. And what makes us so unique is we support our producers' passion and we nurture our consumers' curiosity. Sarah's Country, of course, is produced in alliance with the great people at Global HQ, with the most in-depth journalism and marketing analysis anywhere in the country, with this week's Farmers Weekly hitting your mailboxes today, featuring the latest breakdown of that budget from Thursday and a real focus on getting more people into the primary sector, much of which I would love to focus on going through this week. For all of those stories, make sure you visit farmersweekly.co.nz. And if you haven't yet taken the time to subscribe to My Daily Digest, as you can see the snippet, the thing scrolling along My Daily Digest headlines, but you can get those snippets in your inbox every day. We have a great show for you tonight. So, who's on the show? Farmers are valued in New Zealand by urban consumers and are seen as part of the solution. But to achieve sustainability, it's more about the farming practices that they're critical of. Okay, so how do we have a well-informed public debate? Understand our collective responsibilities and remove barriers for farmers to change. We will discuss the results of an attitudinal survey recently released by our Land and Water National Science Program with the AgResearch Senior Science Social Scientist and Theme Leader, Dr. James Turner, following the recent Open Farms Day analysis. And what were those 4 key themes that came from our urban consumers? All that after 7:20. What was the budget for rural health, rural education and rural connectivity? There was, of course, a lot of money pegged to the redeployment of our unemployed from COVID-19 into the country, without little appreciation for the services that support the rural working population. We're going to have a good yarn with this with Rural Woman National President Fiona Gower about this after 7:30. And to close the show, in an open letter penned to Prime Minister Ardern, Minister Parker, Minister O'Connor and Minister Nash, collectively New Zealand's major food exporters have asked for more trade leadership, as they are very concerned to see major food producing countries increasing subsidies, intervening with price and other measures that will inevitably exacerbate the effect of this crisis on others and hamper our recovery here in New Zealand for our exporters. We will be joined by the International Business Forum Chair, Malcolm Bailey, after 7:40. But to kick off the show, I have invited onto Serious Country, in my mind, an experienced political and business leader about his thoughts on navigating crisis from his experience, the current political climate to be able to do so, and what comparisons and learnings can we take from the late 1980s and early 1990s with Chris Simpson. He's the former economic researcher and director of research under the Bolger government, from Ruth Richardson through Bill Birch. So a lot of interesting information there. Of course, his role now with the Templeton Group. All that is coming up on Serious Country after released this week, fresh off the press, the new on-farm story. You can read about it in the latest Farmers Weekly, and you can watch it now. The excitement the Absalom family from Hawke's Bay still have for farming and their 100-year mindset. This is Serious Country.
The farm's been in the family since the late 1860s. Our children are fifth generation on the farm. I'm one of 4 boys, and Mum and Dad have 11 grandchildren. So we practice what we preach, which is breeding. My name is Daniel Absalom. We farm at Risington, northwest of Napier in Hawke's Bay. I farm with my older brother Jeremy and youngest brother Ben. We farm mainly cattle operation here with around 1,400 hectares total area. We've got a breeding cow herd of 600 plus cows calving down annually. We are big believers in science and technology and have an ability to put it into practice. The exciting thing is, with the technologies coming along, is it speeds up our rate of genetic improvement in our cattle. Feed is 70% of the production costs of a commercial farmer. So we partnered up with GrowSafe Systems in Alberta, Canada, to bring technology that is measuring feed intake. They have access to 5 bunks, so there's 40 head in a pen, 8 animals per bunk. Bunk is on scales, which is weighing that bunk every half a second. Within the bunk is an EID reader, which reads the EID tag of the individual animal, so it knows what animal was eating out of the bunk at that time, how often they eat, how much they eat. So it's very cutting edge technology, but gathers us a treasure trove of information that we can then feed back into our database to work out which animals eat less and gain more. There's massive improvement, a 3 kilo swing over a tonne of feed over 12 months. So it's a significant cost. The exciting thing we know is if you drive down feed intake, you drive down methane emissions. So animals that eat less emit less. It really is a win-win. We want the farm to be here in another 100 years, and so you have to take a long-term approach to farming. You face challenges along the way from a production system in terms of banking pressure or compliance pressure. You know, we do face droughts or weather events that test us, but I would argue that the time is as exciting as it's ever been right now because of those challenges.
Now, as I was saying in the opening there, I want to hear, what did you get up to in the weekend and where did you go? So, of course, you probably don't want to tell everybody, but if there was something that was really special that you've been really looking forward to and being able to go and experience that wonderful weekend with your family, your friends and your loved ones around the country, love to be able to celebrate because, of course, we get great ideas of where we can support local tourism, which, of course, is super important going forward. So put them in the comments below wherever you are watching watching Serious Country across 10 different platforms live. And as you may know, if you have been watching in the past or listening along, we are on podcast on demand, Serious Country as well. If you have any questions for our guests throughout Serious Country as well, please make sure you put them on the comments below and I will get them to you, because that is part of how we roll here. He has sat through several economic shocks as a former director of research of the government parliamentary unit in the early 90s, with unemployment at the time 12% and the economy minus 2%, with government debt sitting around 70% of GDP. Of course, then to go on and watch John Key's government manage the GFC, borrowing $60 billion during their time in government. So I'm excited to welcome to Serious Country to break down in a factual way for us what last week's budget means, and by comparison, how is this downturn ahead going to look? Welcome to Serious Country, Chris Simpson.
Hi, Sarah. Hello, everybody.
Thank you so much. So now, firstly, Chris, I really want to thank you for the layman's terms commentary that I follow on LinkedIn, and I know a lot of other people do, from your experience and, of course, the reports that you currently do now to your investors at Templeton Group. But firstly, what parts of the latest monetary policy moves from both Grant Robertson and Adrian Orr are you not surprised by and surprised by from the last week?
I think both from a monetary and a fiscal policy, Sarah, where I'm genuinely surprised is at the speed in which they're moving. Sort of previous economic shocks, the movement was a lot slower than what it has been today. And I think that's something that New Zealand and New Zealanders can take with some comfort about what tomorrow will look like, just the speed of what's been happening. Okay,
so let's go back to those days we just spoke of that 12% unemployment and the 70% government debt. What was the sort of general feeling in those rooms at the time around what needed to be done, that big action that needed to be taken, but with full responsibility at the table as well?
Yeah, and without breaking confidences, because I was a secretary to the Economic Caucus Committee back in the early 90s, and sitting there, and it was particular around the Ruth Richardson Black budget, and then by about 1992, we weren't seen to be acting fast enough, and so the Bolger government came in with 50% in the 1990s as a poll, and by 1992, because we weren't seen to be acting fast enough, we were down at 16%. And of course, and you had to win an election the following year in 93 to go from 16% to 34, 35%, which is what they won the election at, required a lot of economic focus. So it did actually become all about the economy. But it was almost 2 years of behind the eight ball of what are we actually going to be doing? And that really slowed down the economic response.
What do you believe that we've got enough learnings from these times and resilience to be able to put things in place faster?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the learnings since the late 80s right through to today, they're sort of erring on the side of caution and speed rather than just waiting for the official statistics to come through. So even for somebody like me, and I sat there as the general manager under Don Brash and John Key as at the New Zealand National Party, John wasn't elected the Prime Minister until 2008, and his first budget wasn't until May 2009, nearly 8-9 months after the GFC was in full swing. So there was another lag for the government to do a sizable response. And John's sizable response, including the Christchurch earthquakes, was 60 billion, because he took net debt from nil to 60 billion, whereas Grant Robertson inherited net debt of 20% after John, and they've immediately put in 50 to 60 billion straight away. So again, the confidence is the speed in which both monetary and fiscal policy is reacting at the same time, but coming off a very strong economy. Whereas in 92, when I was sitting there as a junior, as a researcher in the Economic Caucus Committee, the unemployment was massive. There was inflation. It was really dark days. So it's quite the opposite today, where it was very strong and with incredibly strong and fast response to this current economic crisis.
I was a young child watching my grandfather lose our family farm, Chris, to the Clyde Dam, the raising of Lake Dunstan. And we had the privilege of taking the bulges to across the lake. And what was a sort of very sort of ironic time for our family. That was a huge period of infrastructure spending under those particular governments. We're talking about infrastructure pulling us through again. What's different from then or similar?
Well, so prior to that was infrastructure around Think Big, and then what happened in the mid-90s, there was a lot of asset sales. So this government's not talking about asset sales. So there's a lot of asset sales to offset debt, and then by the mid-90s, we were coming out of the recession through asset sales, and with new money, new capital, and new ideas coming into New Zealand about how to do things better, smarter, faster. So that's the big difference that we're not seeing now, that we're not seeing that sort of response from how do you bring new capital around, is there opportunity to invest into organisations that the government may own.
Okay, so on that, well, there's a few different parts to that, but of course, one was James Shaw said that we have a very narrow tax take, and those who profit from COVID will essentially pay off this debt. We're talking to an audience here predominantly of the primary sector, who we're putting our hat on for that export value. So how do you believe that we can nourish and nurture that sector at the same time as being able to manage this government debt?
And that's a good question, because my father was a dairy farmer and my brother's a dairy farmer, but I wasn't quite built to sort of get out of the Land Rover to open the gates. I gave up my dairy farming from there. The way out of this really is focusing on competitive advantage and focusing on the factors of production of land, labour, capital, and leadership. And land from a primary sector, how do we make sure that the likes of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade are opening up the markets for what we produce at the primary sector? And so that's where the real focus needs to come fast from this government, because we are lean and we're mean, because we've been through all these tough times, but we need them out there really supporting the primary sector. So I'd expect more from MFAT and NZTE to be supporting, again, the people who are currently carrying New Zealand, because tourism is not carrying it.
Do you worry about the levers getting very slim now from a monetary perspective with the Reserve Bank and something that's unprecedented times of movement with the OCR?
Yeah, because basically getting to a situation from a monetary perspective that we're in competition with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is all there with low interest rates. So it then comes back to focusing on where your competitive advantages and focusing on where government should be pushing really hard around the exports of what we're doing. So not so much sort of, travel around New Zealand, see your own hometown first. It should really be spending a lot more into that primary sector and selling what we're doing and what we're producing. That's the real opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I knew that you were going to be some little pearls of wisdom, Chris Simpson. I'd love to have you back on the show as well. I know our audience would have certainly loved some real depth. Is there any particular passing messages that you'd like to get out to our farming business owners, agripreneurs, as we call them, to sort of stay through this time?
I think because we're right at the very bottom or near the bottom, now's the time to be investing in their own marketing and pushing who they are and what they're doing. So it really is double down on, for want of a better term, your own public relations, your communications, your marketing, and getting those messages out there so that the world sees them. So that's where I'd be doubling down on.
Couldn't agree anymore. That's Chris Simpson from the Templeton Group and his rich experience in the economic research units there through a lot of those governments through the tough times of the late 80s, early 90s and recovery. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Now, we have some questions coming in. Of course, Sandra Campbell, she's a great avid watcher of Sarah's Country. A night by the river with some neighbours, a bonfire and s'mores. We haven't made it too far yet. There's certainly more time. Joel Rock, my producer here on Sarah's Country, you'll be chomping at the bit to get around New Zealand and have some of those Kiwi experiences. What are some of those things that you've heard, Joel, that are really quintessential Kiwi things to do that tourists don't normally do?
That tourists don't normally do? I mean, I'm a big tourist, so I wouldn't know. I'm just excited to see a Kiwi in the wild. You were doing that at the weekend, weren't you?
I was. It was incredible. I'll give a shout out to Ngā Manu Reserve near Wellington, and go and support the amazing work they do to look after our very rare endangered Kiwi. So yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic. Now, coming up next on Serious Country, we work through the 4 key findings of our latest Land, Our Water survey on urban consumers' attitudes to farming with AgResearch's senior social scientist, Dr. James Taylor. This is Serious Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
Loving that Ravensdown video there, celebrating what we do around the country. So thank you so much for pulling that together, Ravensdown. And loving your comments coming in. Kylie Leonard has said she climbed Mount Tuhara at, hopefully I pronounced that right, near Taupo with extended family. I'll tell you what, I've actually made a bit of a mission to get to all of our great walks, over the next coming years, because all of a sudden I got excited about how the Milford track when the Able Tasman won't be busy. How exciting. I know this is terrible for our tourism businesses to say that, but there's so many exciting things. I've been looking at things to do in Queenstown too. So, make the most of it. When you grow up in Cromwell beside Queenstown, you don't even think to go there, to be honest, anymore. So we have been talking about the weekends that you've had in paradise this weekend out of lockdown and the great places that you've gone around the New Zealand, and of course to be able to eat. We went to the Kapiti Coast, checking out some amazing places. A great brunch place, Sunday Cantina. It opened 7 days prior to lockdown, Joel. And it is a brand new cafe. They were so stoked to be open 7 weeks later. It's so terrible. But Joel, you live down on the strip there, the terrace in Christchurch.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see a real buzz of activity change over the weekend?
Oh, it's been fantastic. Just like people out going to the market. And I mean, you got to wash your hands about 20 times a day, but that's all right. It's a small price to pay for a good burrito.
Oh, you give your details away more than you do online. There's, just going shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like these 3 S policies. You should stay seated. I don't really know about you, but I don't like eating standing up, so that's good. Separate. Being away from others' diners is great, you know, sitting very close to Sharon and hearing about her day out with the girls. It's great to be separated from other diners in a single server. Someone tell me who actually likes multiple waitresses asking you how your meal was while you've got a mouthful, or you're just about to win your point in a debate with your dinner guests, and they come, how's your meal? So yes, a single service, great too. Keep the 3 S's, I reckon. Now it's all about listening to the wants and the needs of the end consumer. And for us producing food and fibre here in New Zealand, we have had mounting pressures from our urban population on their perception, or as we sometimes like to think, their misperception of our farming practices. It's time to get to the bottom of what they really think. Welcome to Sarah's Country, Dr. James Turner. James is here to discuss the findings with our latest Our Land and Water survey on this topic. James, firstly, can you explain the methodology you used behind the survey conducted in conjunction with the Open Farms Day held back on the 1st of March?
Sure. Thanks for the interest in the survey, Sarah. So, as part of that Open Farms Day, which was held on the 1st of March, Our Land and Water, as the sponsor, used it as an opportunity to provide an online survey to over 300 of the 3,500 visitors to those Open Farm Days. And they were asked a series of questions about their perceptions of farming and food in New Zealand, and how those perceptions were changed as a result of spending time out on farm as part of that Open Farms Day.
Okay, so I've got this here in front of me, and there's 4 key insights that were pulled out of that. So let's work through those. Number 1, on-farm experiences build that rural-urban trust to support sustainable farming. What did you find out there?
Yeah, sure. So we found that the overwhelming majority of the Kiwis that got out on farm enjoyed their experience. So 91% said that they would visit a farm again. And the farmers themselves enjoyed the opportunity to share their story about farming, with 67% of the farmers saying that they would host another Open Farm Day again. And then what was particularly interesting is that we surveyed those visitors about their attitudes towards farming and found that as a result of visiting farms, their attitudes towards farming changed. So one great example was that those visitors got a real appreciation for the complexity of farming, that it was more complex than they originally thought. That scored a 5.2 out of 7 on average. And then even more positive was that as a result of visiting these farms, those Kiwis felt more positive about the sustainability of farming in New Zealand. That scored a 5.8 out of 7.
But they still have their own criticisms from what they've heard previously, not so much about farmers being able to make the change, but some of the practices that are embedded within what we do. What were some of those farming practices that consumers in urban population would like to see changed?
Sure. So there was ones around reducing the use of synthetic fertilisers, keeping livestock out of waterways, and that was a nice sort of additional insight that came through, was that was identified by those visitors as one of the top priorities for improving environmental outcomes on farm. And so 43% of the survey respondents identified as that as the top priority. And that really nicely aligns with industry action as well. So, for example, Manaki Whenua have done a survey, the Survey of Rural Decision Makers, and that's identified that 81% of farmers are already taking those sorts of actions, and those are the actions that those visitors identified as really important. So that was great to see.
I'd like to understand what sort of questioning you asked around their attitude to buying local, to support locally grown food over environmentally conscious whole foods, because there's a lot going on there between the New Zealand farming systems, which are very different, and our ability to accreditate on packaging what we do compared to our imported competitive products in this space.
Yeah. So what was interesting was that those visitors to those farms identified that a really important action that they can take to support the sustainability of farming in New Zealand is by buying direct from New Zealand farmers and buying New Zealand grown. And we think that's sort of been prompted by seeing the practices that are already in place on farm to improve the sustainability of farming here in New Zealand. So those respondents talked about being willing to pay more for New Zealand grown premium products. So 64% said they do that, and 72% indicated that they'd be more likely to buy direct from farmers.
So this is part of our Land, Our Water National Science Challenge, of what you're the theme leader of this particular part, and of course with your role at AgResearch, James. Can you explain to us about this wider research theme that you're looking after, capacity for transition, and this is just one part of it?
Sure, yeah. So the capacity for transition theme is about understanding what perceptions and behavioural shifts are needed to help New Zealand transition to a more sustainable farming future. So we want to have our way of supporting well-informed public debates. So like Open Farms was a great opportunity to tap into that, helping to bridge that rural-urban divide that's been talked about, and also building in a collective understanding of responsibility that we can all take for improving the sustainability of farming. So that's recognising that farmers are taking action on farm, but as consumers of food, we can also take action around our food purchasing decisions by buying New Zealand grown, more sustainably produced food, buying direct from farmers.
Yes, Cameron Baggery's latest suggestion around a household management plan and what we can learn from farmers' farm environment plans, which is quite an interesting concept.
Great example, yeah.
Yeah, so also what would be the next sort of part of the challenge for your department around removing barriers to change for farmers and perceptions of what they think people think of them as well?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things. One is supporting efforts like Open Farms and to continue that discussion and to really influence Kiwis' understanding of farming by supporting them to get out on farm and see what's happening. And the other part is to sort of widen the debate, widen the discussion. So we're looking at the opportunity to bring in policymakers, other industry players into a collective debate and discussion about what we can do in our different parts of the food system. So like farmers, what they can do on farm, but what can policymakers do to support and enable change on farm in a positive way, just like us as consumers of food can also help and support that change around our food purchasing choices. Fantastic.
Dr. James there. Sorry. With regards to this Our Land, Our Water, I was just busy thinking about policymakers, but also our politicians and the language they use as well going into, of course, this year's election would be fabulous. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us there, Dr. James Turner, AgResearch, Senior Social Scientist. And I've done some work with the AgResearch Social Science Committee in terms of the work they did with Heartland Strong and the Rural Resilience Program. If you want to go and check that podcast out, check out Heartland Strong. But it's great to see social science now working in a line with physical science and this interdisciplinary approach to science, because there is more than just black and white, and it's great that we're working that out. Now, of course, we're asking you in the comments below. Oh, sorry, I've still got James there. James, I was going to come to you because I forgot with Chris. What was the wonderful thing that you did this weekend out of lockdown?
Sure. So it was my birthday on Saturday. So we were able in level 2 to actually have a birthday party with friends. So I had a couple of friends and their families over, and those friends had their birthdays a couple of days before as well. So
fantastic.
It's great to have a birthday party with friends.
A big joint party. Any sort of special number?
No, it's getting closer to towards the 50s where I start sort of saying, no, I'm not really going to reveal my age.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I like to push people, but that's probably getting a bit far. Congratulations, happy birthday from all of us watching. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to know, those of you who are watching along with Sarah's Country tonight, what did you get up to we're not under anything anymore, but in our newfound legislated freedom, level 2, Kate Taylor says they stayed at home. This, of course, crikey, saving money. This is one thing, we think that it's just going to be all roses going out into this new world, but certainly not. There are so many people affected without jobs and so much uncertainty to be able to actually go and have discretionary spending anymore. So, of course, we certainly have that in balance to the freedom of being able to go out and do the things we used to. So, of course, we have to consider that. Next up on Serious Country, we're going to discuss how rural health and education will look from the budget and the wish list going into the election with Rural Woman National President Fiona Gower up next on Serious Country. This is Serious Country.
Aotearoa, New Zealand has always been a land that has provided for its people, a land of abundance and opportunity. Our dedicated team at AgResearch know that embracing kaitiakitanga will see this continue for future generations. The work we do is transforming the way we farm and revolutionizing the way New Zealanders care for our animals and for our land. We work hard to create the world's most desirable food and bio-based products through smart, sustainable farming, led by some of the world's most phenomenal research and informed by the consumers who benefit from this passion. Through a focus on environmental sustainability and climate change initiatives, this passion will allow our work to continue for generations to come. Our proficiencies in research run wide, from seeds to pest control, high-value food production to practical farming systems and quality assurance. From the smallest rural land use project to international research programs, our science and technology innovations drive the prosperity of our precious agricultural sector. It's through this research that New Zealand retains its position as a scientifically advanced global agricultural leader. Our commitment to the growth of our wider New Zealand economy, its people, and the kaitiakitanga of Aotearoa is at the very heart of every scientific innovation and creation we deliver. AgResearch, firmly grounded in this land, these waters, looking to what's in the stars and the future. Ata matai, matai whetu.
Now, do you know what I love about Serious Country? Because this is where we're starting to really hit our straps. This is where questions from you I'm putting to our guests and they're going, that's a really good idea. And taking that forward. Fiona Windle, I did put your question, it came through a bit later, but in the break to Dr. James, and said, did the survey ask about careers in agriculture and if there was a new interest from that from the open farms? He said, no, it didn't, but what a great idea, and taking forward, they will take that on. So thank you so much. This is where contributing to Comments in Serious Country makes all the difference, especially when Kate Taylor tells me that she did drink a lot of wine over the weekend, so good on you, Kate. So did I. And Jock Innes is telling us that there was a very well supported farmers market at Mount Pleasant in Christchurch, a great little market. That's so good to see people out and about supporting our farmers markets. Now, up next, we are going to one of my wonderful friends, Fiona Gower, National President for Rural Women, and talk about, firstly, Fiona, I know you've been dying to get down to the batch at Port Waikato. I'm sure you must have made it down there this weekend.
Well, yeah, we're living at the Port Waikato, so I've got the beach here on the farm, but we have a beach house down in Maricopa, we hadn't been there since, I hadn't been there since January, so we were hanging out to get down there and checking everything out with things like lawns and the house to make sure everything's okay, and it was just fantastic, beautiful weekend to be down there and just relaxing, having a few wines with friends. Great. It was brilliant to be out again.
I've got to stop promising you a bottle of this rosé from Bob and get this up to you, but I'll come with it. That's always the thing as well.
Sit on our beach and enjoy.
Oh, and would you support my opening comments that we've got to remind ourselves we live in paradise and we've got to be some of the most fortunate population in this world right now?
We do, and I look at where we've been during the whole level 4, level 3 and going to level 2. We do live in paradise. I mean, where we are, we've got the best of everything. You know, we've been able to extend out, and I guess it's rural communities do that because we do have the land that we can spread out and do things on. So really loved it, and you know, beach, bush, rivers. We're so lucky.
Okay, so getting into the nuts and bolts of it, obviously the budget, there's a lot of uncertainty, so there's devil in the details, no point sort of talking about things we don't really know yet. But what was your hopes pinned on, and what stood up for you and didn't?
Okay, so we're really looking at some of the big issues that we deal with, and of course one of them is around health issues, and really great to see that the DHBs are getting funding, and there's sort of 177 million going into the maternity services, and we're really hoping, after all the issues we've had in the rural sector, that our rural midwives get a slice of that so that they can keep on working, and that primary care that we have there, that our women are having equitable services and safe babies being born in wherever they are, and making sure that we can attract people to these services and out into rural, whether it be rural professionals. We'd like to see, more people, the doctors, the nurses, the dentists being attracted into our rural communities, because really important to have them. So that's some of the things we'd like to see. And with some of the other money being spent is about how can we use things like telehealth a lot better to prevent all our rural people having to travel long distances to get services. And I think that's big issue for a lot of us, because it's a long time travelling, whether it be in miles or in time, to get to services. So things like we've already got the mobile surgical buses. We'd like to see a few more these mobile buses, health buses, getting out and about to do some of those services for our rural communities, especially for those people that don't drive or have issues getting into town. So we'd really love to see some of that come through if we possibly can. But certainly the maternity one is the one that we'd like to see really well supported.
Oh, it's been just a slide for a long period of time, and to that point it's got just far beyond. Absolutely, I totally agree, and good on you for all the advocacy work that you do in that space. There's a great article today on Farmers Weekly, Training Our Rural Doctors, with Dr. Anna Fisher from Hara Hospital, and the Rural Hospital Medicine Training Program is relatively new, and this is what include to be able to encourage more GPs into rural areas, but give them skills, because how is operating different in rural New Zealand for these medical professionals?
Because they've actually got to stand a whole lot of other rural health issues that they've probably never come across before, like leptospirosis is a big one out in rural, E. coli, things like that you don't see in the urban centres that they do get out in rural. And how do they diagnose this, making sure that the tests are being done, understand the distance that people have to travel to get to services is another big one for a lot of people, like where we go, like in the South Island or East Capes or something like that, for people to get to their services, they're travelling a long way, and we have to make sure that they get well looked after. So yes, very different services needed in a rural sector, and a lot of understanding of how the people live and what they do. But yeah, it'd be great to get more people trained and out there and understanding, because it is a fantastic lifestyle along with a great career.
Yeah, I know a lot of the policemen in Wanaka love living there, because they're all multi-sporters as well, so they get the best of both worlds. Now,
well, that's it. If they're hunters or the fishermen, or they enjoy their tramping, they're living in those areas and getting this. And for children, you grow up in a rural lifestyle, you can have the opportunity to do all that great stuff that you probably don't get to do in an urban centre. So I really encourage anybody to look at it, for sure.
There's a combination of a few things. I know that wool is your passion, pushing ahead an agenda around wool carpets in schools under Chris Hipkins' renovations of our schools. How do you think we'll get on there, Fiona? And as well as, do you see that we're going to see some of those funds fall through to our rural schools that infrastructure needs upgrading desperately?
Oh, I would hope so, because we were looking at this question last week when we were looking at the budget and this funding that was coming out to schools, to rural schools, and making sure that they do get them, because often in a community we're very limited to where we get our funds from. The fundraising people for everything is the same, and we need to make sure that these schools are being looked after. The big issue is getting contractors out there, is the travel, and so by the time you get people out to your rural schools, half of the budget's gone just on travel. So we'd really like to see this money spent on really important things. As I say, wool carpets and wool insulation, keeping our schools healthy and clean are really important, and making sure that our children are being well cared for, and having great classrooms, and we've got the internet there now, so why don't we get everything else up to speed as well and get them really learning so that they're on a par with their urban counterparts with everything they've got, because some of those schools are pretty low decile and they need all the support we can get for them, and be great to see them all up and running properly and with all the services.
I want to talk about this because myself and yourself have been following this rural connectivity game for a long time now.
Yes.
Federated farmers have been advocating for better rural connectivity, yet we have shifted considerably in the last 5 years, and there's another 15 million tagged pre-budget on this.
Yes.
How much more? And are we is it just now about thinking outside the square to get into these little pockets?
It certainly is, and that's where we're really pushing for the government to use the wireless internet service providers, because these ones are small, they're agile, they can get into those backcountry areas that the large telcos can't get to. So really great to see them on board and lifting it. And we've seen over lockdown under rural broadband or under the connectivity, the issues that people have had trying to get online and do work. So really important that they keep pushing forward for this. And it's not just for broadband, for internet. We would really like to see more of the money go into getting cell phone coverage, and that's for a whole lot of reasons, including health and safety, that we need to have that out there, because there's a lot of areas in New Zealand where we live, for example, or where our beaches, there is just no cell phone coverage. So how far do you have to go if you need to get help is a big one for us, and making sure that we've got connectivity, whether it be cell phone or with internet, to make it attractive for these people we're trying to get into our rural communities with all the money that's MPI are going to get for all these new projects. If we need to be able to offer them those services, otherwise people aren't going to want to come. So that's a really big push for us. It's for our education for our children, it's for these health services we can do by telehealth, it is for our businesses, it's for our social, we've seen that with their social isolation, the importance of internet, and it's also the health and safety. It's all those things really important that we get as much of New Zealand covered as we can. And we often work with the Telecommunication Users Association of New Zealand as well, so TOANZ, and they're really helping us push for that as well, because that's really where they are, and they can see the importance of it as well, getting out into rural, because we're running huge businesses on our farms, and we've got these incredible small businesses that our women do that are on farm that are relying on internet for selling their products, and we need to make sure that they can keep their businesses rolling as well, because we really need to support them.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking though, some of those fantastic female-led rural businesses or accommodation places that pride themselves on no internet coverage for those urban people to escape to. So we're going to come up with something you could just blanket around those beautiful on-farm accommodations.
Absolutely. That's where you just take it like we do at home with the children. Oh, look, the Wi-Fi's been pulled out.
Yes.
But I think there is that need that people really do expect it when they move out and there to live. Yes. They need to have that. But when you're just going on a holiday, it's actually, and after having a whole weekend of absolutely no coverage whatsoever, it's bliss. But we do need it for day-to-day living for those businesses as well, because they need to be able to connect with the outside world to promote themselves, and because these are the ones that are employing local people, using local produce, and we need to make sure that we can keep them going as well through this tough time.
Thank you so much, National President for Rural Women, Fiona Gower there. Hey, now, Joel, one place I'm going to send you, I'm just going to have your entire time here in New Zealand full up from my recommendations, is Golden Bay. Have you done any research into Golden Bay yet?
I haven't really yet. I think we've talked about it on the Few Showdown, on the
Okay,
show.
So in Golden Bay, there's this must-go place. It's called the Mussel Inn, and it's a real character place. They've got a totem pole of cell phones all attached and nails through them, and it's a sign as in, don't you dare be seen on your phone, otherwise it'll get nailed to the totem pole. And it's a great way of setting a mood in a bar.
Yeah, it's wee bit intimidating.
No, it's a great place. I've got to highly recommend it. Now, to close the show tonight, we discuss the open letter penned to the PM and our ministers from the International Business Forum to ensure they know how vital trade leadership is right now. It's in tackling our trade distortions and our discriminatory policies that are happening, we're seeing around the world. I'm going to discuss with our International Business Forum chair and wears many other hats across our industry, Malcolm Bailey.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Well, maintaining critical trading relationships and opening and strengthening markets must remain top of mind as issues for New Zealand as it confronts the COVID-19 crisis. Our major food exporters have advised the government. In a letter pinned to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and her ministers, 11 trade organisations representing the largest part of New Zealand's food export effort have outlined their support for the government's continuing trade push. Some countries were resorting to bigger thy neighbour policies, such as imposing export restrictions on food as well as medical products. And discuss this is Michael Bailey with us now on Sarah's Country. Firstly, Michael, can you explain this term? I haven't heard it before, bigger thy neighbour, and how is it going to affect our New Zealand trade, or is affecting?
Yeah, it's a situation, Sarah, where you get countries just simply think very short term and say what's good for me right now, we'll cut it, and forget that the history lesson is that expanding trade in a time like this is what is needed to help get the economic recovery worldwide. And we very much drew our comments from the lessons of the 1930s with the Great Depression, where many governments made the mistake of trying to rebalance their books as their economy shrank, and that meant imposing higher trade barriers through tariffs, and that made the problem much worse. So unemployment went higher, and then you get another round of balancing the books and so on. So the lesson is expand trade, don't shrink it as part of the recovery.
And so just in terms of these discriminatory policies that you mention, how are some of those things that New Zealand could do better at from a leadership perspective to ensure that we don't just promote self-sufficiency?
Well, New Zealand's actually got a good track record of promoting freer trade, and that has served our economy really well and improved the standard of living for New Zealanders. But in a time like this, you get a few people commenting that maybe we should be restricting some of our exports. We heard one view around log exports, that we should keep the jobs in New Zealand by restricting those exports. Now that has some short-term appeal, but of course the problem is it would put at risk a lot of our other trade with some major markets. So we've really got to live by what we have long believed in, which is opening up trade, not shrinking it or putting in place some sort of temporary barrier.
It's going to be hard, Malcolm. I can just see it now, going into an election with a lot of small businesses hurting, and this buy local, support local rhetoric, very similar to what we've seen in the US, and very popular politically.
Well, look, we all understand the appeal of buy local. I mean, it makes sense to support the businesses that are close to you. But we also have to have that bigger view and certainly understand the history. So there's nothing wrong with New Zealanders who can't travel offshore at the moment, for example, buying local by having a holiday at home within New Zealand. That makes a lot of sense. But it's to get the right perspective and not get caught up in the short-term thinking, which would then create us a big long-term problem.
Okay, so what are some of those costs and barriers to our supply chains that the government can ensure doesn't hinder our export markets?
Well, in fact, this COVID-19 crisis has exposed that there are things we could do better. And in the middle of all the problems that we've faced, we've found that there are ways of electronically handling some of the paperwork that has been problematic for some exporters. So, and a lot of these things get covered under the name of non-tariff barriers. So we're all familiar with tariffs or taxes, which are imposed on goods by other countries to slow the rate at which they come into their country. But in this case, this is paperwork and some other barriers that don't need to exist at all. And so it's an opportunity for New Zealand to smarten up a bit as well, and we've encouraged that. But fundamentally, New Zealand is in a good position because of many years of living by what we believe in, and it's really other countries that have to do the hard yards and open up their markets more.
And of course, under the rules-based system of the World Trade Organization that you have heavily been a part of course, with the International Business Forum that you're the chair of, New Zealand's leadership in these statements that are coming out to ensure that countries play by the rules, how does that sort of affect when we're supporting other countries and our relationship and reliance on China?
Well, you're right. The World Trade Organization is pivotal to what we do as a country in terms of our exporting. We're a small country. I know we've just gone past 5 million people, but when you go up against a country with 1 billion people, for example, and they don't see things the same way as you do, having the World Trade Organization with its dispute mechanism system to fall back on to resolve the matter is crucially important. And of course, there's a story there where there has been the blocking of appellate judges for the dispute mechanism at the WTO. So in many respects, it's defunct at the moment, and it's vital that we get that up and running again. And there are a number of initiatives by various countries to work around that in the meantime and push for some reforms at the WTO to get that up and running. But the key thing is that it's inevitable that there will be disputes from time to time. It doesn't mean that your relationships with the countries in question are broken. It just means you've got to have other parties get involved to help sort it out. And that's where the WTO comes in. So going forward, having the WTO working well is a crucial part of world economic recovery from this event.
And in closing, dated 30th of April, address to one Honourable David Parker, Minister of Trade and Economic Growth. Have you had a response?
We haven't yet, but these things are like that. We've sent a clear message that these are our expectations of the way forward, and our government has actually been very good at playing its part internationally and teaming up with other countries and making calls for the right things to happen. So that's the way it works, and we're very thankful that this government and governments before it have believed in trade, and long may it last that we will have that support.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Malcolm Bailey with his hat on there as the chair of the International Business Forum, talking about how we can get through a world that is starting to become very protectionist in its approach, but reminding them of the rules on the table. Now, that is all we've got time for tonight on Sarah's Country. I just wanted to read out the last comment here. Far North JB, I'd really love to know your real names. It's their Facebook name. Not much change here. Busiest time of year calving. We have welcomed grandparents back into our bubble. How very special to be able to connect with family members. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and being active in the comments. That is my favourite part as you join us. And of course, there's a lot of you who are listening to this on podcast on demand. If you want to send me an email, sarah@periummedia.com, or slip into the inboxes on social. I love hearing from you, your suggestions on guests, your comments and feedback on the show. I love all of it, regardless. And of course, if you want to subscribe to Podcast on Demand, search Sarah's Country. All of those subscribers are blowing up every week. I'm really, really enjoying the traction that we've got here. So I just want to say good night. Go well and never let it go out of your mind that we continue to live in the best country in the world, New Zealand.
This is Sarah's Country.